We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph in Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 38a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was looking for the source for bishul akum, that it is prohibited. That's items that are cooked by an ovid kochavim, by an idol worshiper, that those foods are prohibited. And the Gemara brought a pasuk, but the Gemara rejects the pasuk as the source for a number of reasons on the previous Amud. And so the Gemara now continues, Ela midrabanan. Rather, the idea of bishul akum is really an idea midrabanan. It's from the Rabbanan ukra smachta b'yalm. And the pasuk is just something to rely on, just a hint to this idea. Rashi explains midrabanan shelo yeh Yisrael rogel etzlo b'maychol v'mishtet, so that a Jew is not going to be accustomed to eating by the non-Jew food and drink v'yachilenu davar tameh. Then he's going to end up eating something that is not kosher. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak says that Rav says, Kol hanechol kemos shehu chai, anything that would be eaten raw, ein bo mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim. There's no issue. If that is cooked by an idol worshiper, it's not an issue. Besura masnu hachi. They taught Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav. That statement was taught in the above fashion in Surah. But Pumbedisa masnu hachi. But in Pumbedisa, the same Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav, it was taught as follows, a slightly different version. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav. Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said that Rav said, Kol she'eno nechol al shulchan melachim. Anything that's not eaten on the table of kings by distinguished individuals, lalafis boas apas, to accompany bread, ein bo mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim. If it's a kind of simple food that wouldn't be on the table of kings, there's no issue of bishul akum. There's no issue if it's cooked by an idol worshiper. The Gemara says, "My beinai." What's the difference between the two versions? The Gemara says, "Ika beinai." There is the following difference between them: dogim, ketanim, small fish, viardi and mushrooms, vidaisa and porridge. And Rashi explains, dogim, ketanim, viardi, vidaisi, ein nechol and chayin. These are things that are not eaten raw. So since they're not eaten raw, according to the first version, there would be an issue of bishul akum. However, ve'ein olin al shulchan melachim. They are not things that would be found on the tables of kings, and therefore, according to the second version, since they're not found on the table of kings, there'd be no issue of bishul akum. Lalishna kama, again, according to the first version, yesh b'hen mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim. There's an issue of bishul akum. Lalishna basra sharu, but according to the latter version, it would be permitted. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravasi Amar Rav. Ravasi says that Rav says, Dogim ketanim meluchim, small fish that are salted, ein bohen mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim. There is no issue of bishul akum. Rashi explains, Meluchin necholin kemos shehein machmas malchim, because they're salted, they're eaten as is, and essentially they're eaten raw. Therefore, there's no issue of bishul akum. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Im tzolon ovid kochavim somech Yisrael aleya mishum eruve tavshilin. Let's say an ovid kochavim, an idol worshiper, were to roast them, so a Jew could actually rely on that in terms of eruv tavshilin. Eruv tavshilin is what allows, you make this eruv in order to allow you to cook from Yontiv to Shabbos, and that would be considered a tavshil. It would be considered a cooked item for the eruv tavshilin. And the Gemara continues, V'yavdinu ovid kochavim kasa deharsana. If the ovid kochavim prepares the fish as a dish called kasa deharsana, we'll see Rashi in a moment. So asur, so then it would be forbidden. Rashi explains, kasa deharsana is tigon b'morias shuman dogim im kamach. You fry it with fish oil and flour. That was a certain dish they would prepare. So that already is bishul akum, and that would be asur. The Gemara says, Pshita, well, that's obvious. Of course, in that situation, the ovid kochavim is preparing it, and the flour is something that you would not eat raw. The Gemara says, no, ma'u detema, because what might you have said, harsana ikr, that the main part is the harsana, the main part is the fish oil, which is something you could actually eat raw. Kamash malan. So what it's teaching us is that kimcha ikr, that the flour is the main thing, and since the flour is the main ingredient, therefore the flour is something you would not eat raw, and it is an issue of bishul akum. Rashi explains, Harsana ikar va'oso morius nechol kemos shu chai v'shari. Again, if you're discounting the flour, so it would be eaten raw, and therefore maybe it should be permitted. Kamash malan kimcha ikar. It's teaching us that the flour is the main. V'yesh bo mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim sha'kemach eino nechol chai. Therefore it is an issue of bishul akum, because flour is not eaten raw. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Bruna Amar Rav. Rav Bruna says that Rav says, Ovid kochavim shehitzis es or ba'agam. If an ovid kochavim, an idolater, he lights a fire in a meadow. We'll see in a moment why he would do that. Kol hachagavim sheba'agam. All of the grasshoppers in the meadow, asurin, those are forbidden. Rashi explains, Kol hachagavim sheba'agam, all of the grasshoppers in the meadow, shenecharchu v'nispashlu, they were roasted, they were cooked, machmas or, they were cooked because of the fire. Rashi says, Chagav eino to'en shchita. Rashi notes that a grasshopper does not need any kind of shchita, doesn't need to be slaughtered in the proper manner like other animals. And so in any case, the point over here is the ovid kochavim, he lit the fire in this meadow, he essentially cooked these chagavim, these grasshoppers, and so Rav is saying, Kol hachagavim sheba'agam asur, and all of the grasshoppers in the meadow are prohibited. And the Gemara says, hey chidami, what exactly is the case? Ilema delo yada hay tahar v'hay tameh. If the situation is we don't know which are kosher and which are not kosher, it's an issue of kashrus. So ma'ir yovad kochavim, what do you have to have a case with an idolater lighting the fire? Afilu Yisrael nam, you're going to have the same problem even if a Jew lit the fire. And so the Gemara continues, Ella, rather the issue is mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim. The issue is that these grasshoppers, they were cooked by the idol worshiper, and that's why they're prohibited. But the Gemara says, Ki agavna miyaser, but in such a situation, is it really prohibited? Is this really an issue of bishul akum? V'yamar Rav Chanan Barami, Yamar Rav Pedos, Amar Rav Yochanan. But Rav Chanan Barami said, that Rav Pedos said, that Rav Yochanan said, Hayovid kochavim dechorich reisha. Let's say an ovid kochavim, an idolater burns the head of an animal. Shari lemechel minei. It's permitted to eat from it. Afilu mereisha one, even from the tip of the ear, which is easily burned, easily cooked. It's still permitted. And what's the reason? Alma, we see lavure seir kamechavin, that the intention of the ovid kochavim is just to remove the hair that's on the head of the animal. If the intention is not to cook, the intention is just to remove the hair, then it's permitted. It's not an issue of bishul akum. And we can apply this to the case of the ovid kochavim lighting the fire in the meadow as well. Hachanami over here also, legaluye agma kamechavin, the intention of the ovid kochavim is just to clear the meadow. He's not intending on cooking the grasshoppers, and therefore it should not be an issue of bishul akum. And so the Gemara goes back to what it originally suggested. Liolam delo yada haytar v'haytame. Really, the issue is when you cook these grasshoppers in this fashion, you don't know now which grasshoppers are kosher and which are not. Now the question on that was, what do you have to have a case with an ovid kochavim? Even if a Jew would light the fire in the meadow, it would be the same problem. And the Gemara says, indeed, that is true. It happened to be that there was such an incident. The incident was, it took place with an ovid kochavim, with an idolater, and that's why we bring that scenario, but it would be the same exact issue if it was a Jewish person who lit the fire. And Rashi explains, Afilu mereish one, even the tip of the ear, sha'ozen raka. The point over here is you light the head on fire of the animal, and the ear is soft. V'nitzlis b'charichos. It's actually going to be roasted, so you're going to have actually cooked it. Afilu hachi, nevertheless, shari, it is permitted. However, ovid kochavim lo levashel neskavin, because if the ovid kochavim didn't have intention to cook, then it's permitted, and that's what we're applying again in this case of the meadow as well. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, and the Mesoras Hashas notes that the girsa should be Rav Chanan bar Ami, Amar Rav Pedos, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because that was the same girsa as above. So Rav Chanan bar Ami says that Rav Pedos says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Hayovid kochavim dechorich reisha. If an ovid kochavim, if he burns the head of an animal, shari lemechel minei, it's permitted to eat from that. Afilu mereish one, even from the tip of the ear. And again, the idea was that the intention of the ovid kochavim in that case was not to cook; it was just to remove the hair. And so the Gemara continues. Amar Ravina says, Hilkach, therefore. Hay ovid kochavim deshada sichsa la'atuna. Let's say an ovid kochavim, he takes a peg and he throws it into the oven. The idea is that he's doing that. It's a soft peg. He wants to harden it in the oven. The cover bo Yisrael kara mei kara. Now a Yisrael, a Jew, had already put a gourd into the oven from before that. So shapir dummy, that would be fine. And the idea is because the ovid kochavim, he's not intending on cooking in this case. His intention is for the peg. The Gemara says, Pshita, well, isn't that obvious? It's an obvious application of the above halacha. The Gemara says, no, one might think that the intention of the ovid kochavim is to cook this particular kli, it's to cook this particular peg. Kamash malon, it's coming to teach l'sharure mana kamachavin, that his intention actually is to harden the peg. It's not considered to be an intention for cooking, and that's why it is permitted. And Rashi explains, Deshad Sichsa, again, he put a peg into the oven, liyavsha b'tanor, in order to dry it in the oven. The cover by Yisrael kara meikar, and the Jew had put a gourd in there from before that. V'hitmin Yisrael b'tanor dalas chay, he put a raw gourd in there beforehand. Kodem shehusa katanor, before the oven was even lit. V'ovid kochavim hesiko, and then the ovid kochavim, the idolater, lights the oven, v'nisbashal hadalas, and the gourd is cooked. So shapir dummy, that's fine. Hoel v'ovid kochavim, lo levashal neskavin, since the idolater did not have intention to cook. And the Gemara says, Pshita, well, it's obvious. Hainu de Rabbi Yochanan, that's the same teaching, same basic principle as Rabbi Yochanan. It all has to do with intention. The Gemara says, no, what might you have said? This ovid kochavim was intending on cooking the peg. So therefore he's lighting the fire for cooking purposes. Kamash Malon is coming to teach us, there's no such thing as cooking when it comes to kalim, when it comes to vessels. He's just trying to harden the vessel. He's hardening the peg. He's not thinking about bishul. Rashi says, it's a language of hardening. That's the same way we use it when we say the words shrir v'kayam. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, Hiniach Yisrael basar al gabi gecholim, if a Jew places the meat on the coals, uva oved kochavim v'hafach bo, and the oved kochavim, the idolater, comes and turns over the meat on the coals, mutter, it is permitted. And the Gemara says, Hechi dami, what exactly is the case? Ilema de'ilo hafach behave bashal. If you're going to say the cases where if he didn't turn it over, it would have cooked anyhow, meaning the oved kochavim is adding nothing, so then pshita, then it's obvious that it should be permitted. So elalav, rather is it not, de'ilo hafach, that if he didn't turn it over, lo have bashal, then it wouldn't have cooked. Essentially, the oved kochavim is playing a critical role in cooking this item. But then amai mutter, but then why is it permitted? Bishulei shel ovdei kochavim ninu. This is the cooking of the oved kochavim, and this is bishul akum. And so the Gemara says, lo no tzrich, it's necessary to ilo hafach have a bashal betarti shoy. The case is as follows: if he didn't turn it over, so it would have cooked in 2 hours. V'hashta kabashal b'chodeshayit, and now the oved kochavim, by turning it over, it's now going to cook in 1 hour. So ma'u detema, what might you have said? Krove bishula milsi, that the fact that he's making it cook more quickly, that is something significant, and therefore this should be considered bishul akum. Kamash Malan is coming to teach that that is not considered significant. It would have cooked anyhow, it would have taken a little longer, but it would have cooked anyhow, and therefore it's not bishul akum in this case. The Gemara says, 1 second, V'amar Ravasi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Ravasi say that Rabbi Yochanan said, Kol shu k'maichel ben drusoi, anything that is k'maichel ben drusoi, Maichel ben drusoi means it's not fully cooked, it was either a third cooked or half cooked. Ein bo mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim, so that is not considered to be an issue of bishul akum. If it's k'maichel ben drusoi, means to say that it actually was cooked at least that much. Let's say Maichel ben drusoi is a third cooked, it was already at least a third cooked. So if it makes it to that stage, and then the oved kochavim cooks it, it's not a problem. Ha'eno k'maichel ben drusoi, but that means that if it does not reach to the level of Maichel ben drusoi, so yesh ba mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim, apparently that is an issue of bishul akum. And so therefore that should be the same thing over here, where he's making the cooking process go faster, so he's participating in the cooking process. That should be a problem of bishul akum. And the Gemara says, no, there it's different. Hasam over there could go into osvei besilta. Over there, the Jew put it in a basket. It was something that was not even cooked, k'maichel ben drusai, and it wasn't on the oven. It was in a basket. V'shakli oved kochavim v'osvei b'tanura. And the oved kochavim takes it and puts it in the oven. There already we say it's a problem bishul akum. But if it's already in the oven, or if it's already cooking, and the oved kochavim is just speeding up the process, that would not be significant. And the Gemara continues, Tanya nami hachu, we have a brisa like this as well. Miniach Yisrael basar al gabi gecholim, a Jew is allowed to place meat on coals, uva oved kochavim u'mahapich bo, and the idolater could come and turn it over, ad sheyavu Yisrael mi beis haKnesses, until the Jew comes back from the shul, or mi beis hamedrash, or from the beis medrash, v'yeino choshesh, and there's no concern. And similarly, shofeses isha kedera al gabi kiro, a woman can place a pot on a stove, uvaso ovedes kochavim, and then the ovedes kochavim, the woman idol worshiper, she can come along, and again, that's not going to be a problem. Rashi explains ben drusai. Again, Maichel ben drusai is it's cooked, but it's not fully cooked. Listim haya, ben drusai was a robber. V'ochel kol davar hamavushal ksas. He would eat things very quickly that were just cooked a little bit. And so again, the Gemara was making a distinction if it reached the point of Maichel ben drusai, or if it didn't reach that point. And then the Gemara said basil. So when we say it's a problem, that's, let's say it's in a basket. Basal, it's in a basket. Aval hacha de mancha agomri. But over here where it's already on the coals, belav hesek dovid kochavim havim evasha lo lezman meruba. Without the idolater, it still would be cooked. If you just leave it there, it's going to get cooked. It might take a long time, but it will happen. And finally, Rashi says, Shvisas Kedera Kari Kishanosin Osala, or the term Shvisas Kedera just means when you're placing something on the fire. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Ches Amid Beis.